In this video, we're going to learn about the transform property. The transform property has basically three different values and then several variations of them. The first one we're going to do is the rotate. So if we take transform and we use the rotate value, and here you see the different variations, I'm just going to use the basic rotate, and I'm going to say rotate it by 30 degrees. And this is the image that's in the header, so that's this tree up here, and it rotated it by 30 degrees. Now I want it to rotate the other way, so I'm going to use a negative 30 degrees. The other option is I could use a positive 330 and it would land it in the same place. So there's a rotate. Now let's try that rotate property on a hover. So here we have an image. Let's see what we've got a class set on it. So we have class idea. So if we go dot idea and we want to transform it by rotating it, and let's go ahead and rotate it 90 degrees. And we do that, and it's truly rotated 90 degrees. But instead of doing it just on it when we first do it, let's do it on hover. Okay, so when we first load the page, it's where it belongs, and then when we hover, it transforms. Okay, see how that happens? It transforms when we hover. Now notice how it happens all at once. Well, if we want to mellow that out a little, we can add a transition. And so we can say on the idea class, whenever the transform property, and it turns out that transform is animatable, so whenever the transform property is changed, have it take 2 seconds. So there we go. We refresh it, and now when we hover, it takes 2 seconds to move, and 2 seconds when we change it back. Okay, let's go ahead and rotate it 360 degrees. And that turns it, oh, we have to refresh it. And that turns it all the way around. Okay, goes the whole 360 degrees. And it takes 2 seconds to do that. Now watch what happens. By the way, this, if you want, let's say that we don't have transition on it. We just say rotate it 360 degrees when we hover. We hover, and what happens? It rotates 360 immediately, which means it looks like it's back in exactly the same spot. You don't even see the move. So that's just something to be aware of. When you do it for 360 degrees, you don't actually even see it if you don't put a transition on it. And there you can rotate it. Okay, another property another value that transform does, let's go over here and do this testing image. And we can transform, but now what we want to do is translate. And here's several variations of translate, and I'm just going to translate X, and I'm going to translate, let's do 60 pixels. So watch where it is, and it shifts. I'm going to do this on hover again, so we can watch it happen. And I'm going to go ahead and put a transition so we're still going to do testing. And whenever we do the translate property, I want it to take, let's do 3 seconds on this one. Oh, sorry, it's transform. Notice that translate is the value and transform is the property. So I've got to use transform here. There you go, and see my editor tells me that because it changes color. Okay, so now it's at the beginning it hasn't translated at all. In fact, it doesn't do the transform until you hover over it. And then it moves over when you come back. So when you hover, it transforms by moving that many pixels. And when you unhover, it goes back. And it happens over 3 seconds. So it's only translating X. Still rotating. Another one is scale. So let's go ahead and do these words up here. And let's do it on hover. And we want to transform it. And the value for transform is scale. And here's a whole bunch of different values. So scale or varieties of it. And I want to scale it 2 times. So I'm going to say that. And it jumps right to 2 times as big. Or I could do 0.5 and refresh. And it jumps right now. Notice how this is trickier. See what it's doing? Because when I hover, it goes to 0.5, and when I unhover, it goes back big. But notice the gap between the different size. And so as soon as I hover, it gets smaller, and then I'm no longer hovering over it. So you can come up with weird things like this, and so you've got to be careful about doing that. In fact, we can solve the problem by doing that, a transition on it as well. So let's do dot words, and then it happens a little bit slower so it doesn't give you the same effect. And whenever we're doing the transform property, we want it to take 2 seconds. And now it takes 2 seconds. Now you'll still have the same problem. If it goes out, right, and then if I move it all, as long as I stay in one position, it'll keep going, but as soon as I move it all, it responds to that movement. So you still have the problem, but it isn't quite as jarring. So you want to be kind of careful with those kind of transitions. You can do more than one transform at a time. So with the words, I'm doing a transform scale, but if I put a space and I do another property and I say, okay, I also want to rotate it, so I can rotate it by 180 degrees. No, let's just do 90. Bet that will look better. Save that, and so now I refresh, and when I hover, it's going to scale and rotate. Okay, so see it rotating and changing the scale. I'm going to change it to 2 so I make it bigger, so I rotate and make it bigger. There it rotates big. All right, so that's the transform property, and how nice that works with transition as well, so that it happens over time.